30 Soccer Stories, presented by PNC Bank.
The story of the Jules Rimet Trophy is one of the most important stories, unknown by probably the most rabid soccer fans around the world. And involves fascinating personalities, not only in sports, but in history. The story includes the Nazis, Mussolini, Pele, even a dog named Pickles. This trophy is the modern-day holy grail of trophies in sports. And to have possession of it was the ultimate for that country. And the fact that to this day, nobody knows where the real trophy is, I thought would make a brilliant film.
On July 11, 1997, Sotheby's auction house placed a replica of the original World Cup trophy up for sale. A mere copy, this small trophy might have gone relatively unnoticed, but instead, the auction took a surprising turn.
On the day of the auction, the reserve price was quickly passed and a bidding war ensued.
£40,000, £50,000,
£60,000.
Now, why were these people bidding for the replica of the World Cup?
£100,000.
Because they thought it was the real thing.
There's a lot of debate about what happened to the trophy.
In 1966, the trophy disappeared.
Everyone in the world is asking, where is the World Cup?
The World Cup curse had struck again.
Ransom demand of £15,000.
For a long time, the trophy was in the middle of just this upheaval in the 20th century.
Hitler believed it had mystical powers.
Whether it's players or countries, this is by far the most competitive trophy, the most desired trophy. And we don't even know where it is right now.
The trophy may well have been melted down.
It's all part of the mystique.
The statuette has almost hypnotized the world over the years.
So when this cup came up in auction in London in 1997, FIFA said, right, that's the real World Cup, that's the real Jules Rimet, so we will pay any price for it.
£150,000.
£200,000.
For me, it's a comedy story.
There's a lot of intrigue.
It's a farce, basically.
The truth is actually stranger than the fiction.
So I think that sums it up quite nicely.
The Jules Rimet Trophy is alone among the pantheon of great prizes in sport, in carrying with it such a mysterious history.
It's so funny when you talk about the history of a trophy like this and where it's been and where it might have been, and there's a lot of apocryphal stories, but you know, they do have the ring of truth.
The trophy has been hidden away, stolen, ransomed, and replicated. But what makes this trophy so coveted?
The World Cup is the one global competition that all countries care about. It's a kind of prestige competition between nations. If you win the World Cup, you feel for a day or two that your country is the best country in the world.
The World Cup tournament was the dream of French soccer enthusiast Jules Rimet, who saw sports as an opportunity to unite and uplift the people of the world.
Jules Rimet was a visionary Frenchman who, after witnessing the horrors of the First World War, thought that sport could replace battle in some way and bring mankind closer together. He became the president of FIFA and was instrumental in bringing the World Cup to the world's attention.
Held in 1930 in Montevideo, Uruguay, the first World Cup ushered in a new era in international soccer.
Because of Jules Rimet's involvement in the tournament over the years and his input, they decided that they would actually name the trophy the Jules Rimet Trophy.
Jules Rimet hired famed French sculptor Abel Lafleur to design a trophy that would represent the glory of the World Cup. Standing 35 centimeters tall, Lafleur designed the trophy in the likeness of Nike, the Greek goddess of victory, resplendent with her wings splayed like the sun's rays. An Art Deco masterpiece, forged in sterling silver, plated by 14-karat French gold. The trophy inspired and captivated the world for the next half a century.
It was a beautiful piece of art, and I don't think that Jules Rimet would realize what it would come to stand for, and that it would become arguably the most famous sports trophy the world would ever see.
when I see the World Cup trophy. I think of all the human beings around the world who would want to hold that trophy or have their country hold that trophy as the winner. And it's almost overwhelming.
When you look at the beautiful French gold, you can't help but be drawn into it.
As the World Cup tournament grew in size and significance, so did the stature of the Jules Rimet trophy. In 1934, it was passed from Uruguay, champions of the 1930 World Cup, to the new victor, Italy. But by 1938, as the Italian team prepared to defend its title during the third World Cup in France, political tensions brought the world to the brink of what would soon become the bloodiest war in human history.
There's a famous quote that football, particularly international football, is war without the shooting. And I think that's very much what the World Cup is.
The 1938 World Cup was only the third World Cup ever. And it was kind of remarkable. It took place, you know, against this sort of changing political and national backdrop around Europe.
World Cup 1938 in France. Nazis are starting to realize, well, a lot of the German public is getting quite interested in soccer.
All sports were seen as a sign of superiority and national pride, and there was a lot of jingoism.
Adolf Hitler witnessed his ally, Benito Mussolini, benefit from the nationalistic pride generated by Italy's victory in 1934. And so the German propaganda machine turned its attention to the game of soccer.
Joseph Goebbels, the German propaganda chief of the time, was very interested in soccer and very frustrated that Germany kept losing.
I think very much that the fascist movement used sport to emphasize identity and sense of supremacy.
Hitler and the Nazi leadership were thinking, well, it would be nice to do that in soccer as well. The Germans did have an advantage in that in 1938 they annexed Austria, and they inherited a lot of the excellent Austrian players, and so their team was stronger.
And the idea was to send a German-Austrian team with about 5 players from one country, 6 from the other, that of course was going to win the World Cup and was going to add to the greater glory of Nazi Germany.
All of a sudden, the Austrian national team and their star players became effectively Germans.
Matthias Sindelar, who was the star player of the Austrian team. A very, very proud Austrian, of course. He refused to play for the German team, saying he was a bit too old, that he was injured, and he was only in his early 30s, and then found dead in controversial circumstances soon after.
But it didn't work out for the Germans. They were defeated in the first round.
They had a slogan saying something like 60 million Germans will play in the World Cup. And then they lost to little Switzerland, and the Swiss slogan became, we only needed 11 people to do it. They couldn't do it with 60 million. So the World Cup 38 was a big humiliation for the Nazis.
While the German side suffered a shameful early exit from the tournament, its fascist ally and defending champion, Italy, prevailed, ultimately defeating Hungary in the final and solidifying its status as soccer's reigning power.
The Italians winning the tournament in 1938 gave Mussolini and the fascist movements a huge boost to their cause. On a personal level, Mussolini must have undoubtedly felt great, getting one up on his Axis ally, Adolf Hitler's team, who suffered a demoralizing first-round exit from the tournament.
Now, the rule was that the nation that wins the cup gets to keep it until the next World Cup. And in 1938, Italy have won. But then the war breaks out.
With the outbreak of war and Germany's power growing, Hitler would again turn his eye to the prize that had evaded him in the World Cup, the Jules Rimet. And this time, he would stop at nothing to possess it. As the war unfolded, playing fields turned to battlefields, forcing the cancellation of upcoming World Cups. With alliances shifting in Italy and Benito Mussolini forced out of power, rumors began to spread rumors of Nazi interest in Italian artifacts, including the coveted Jules Rimet trophy.
Hitler started the Reichsleiter Rosenberg task force to gather all artworks and mystical objects, such as the Spear of Destiny, the Holy Grail, also in that category, the World Cup. Believing that if he held these artifacts, he could prolong the life of the Reich.
Sensing a coming storm, one brave commissioner of the Italian Football Federation took action.
Ottorino Barassi took the decision to remove the trophy from Rome to stop the Germans from getting it.
Barassi found himself in Cremona, and he was terrified that the Germans were going to basically steal the cup.
The Nazis had had a long history of plundering everywhere they went in Europe, take what they wanted, destroy whom they wanted.
The trophy in itself as a symbol of fascist domination and a work of art would have a great deal of value for the Nazis.
It's wartime. We're dealing with the Nazis. We're dealing with the German occupation of Italy. It was an extremely chaotic environment.
It was in the middle of just this upheaval in the 20th century.
So Barassi arranged for the club to be hidden.
Well, the story that I always knew was that he had it in a shoebox under his bed.
He takes the cup, he put it in a shoebox under his bed.
Why hide a thing under your bed?
I believe it was a matter of Italian pride, just to protect it.
Barassi apparently keeps it under his bed in a shoebox. And at one point, there's I think, a raid on his house.
The Nazis came in and they looked for the trophy. And they weren't able to find it.
Peace didn't come to Italy until Germany surrendered in April of 1945. They were in a devastated landscape. There were very few resources on which to rebuild a life. And so 1950 and the resumption of the World Cup must have, on the one hand, you'd say, well, that's pretty trivial comparing to the problems that people had. On the other hand, those sorts of events can often help people get over their troubles, and they can be taken as a sign that things are getting better.
So when the war ends, Ottorino Barassi returns as Jules Rimet to FIFA.
After a 12-year hiatus, the world was once again ready to come together in the spirit of international competition.
It's a 1950 tournament. FIFA rose from the ashes somewhat themselves.
Ottorino Barassi and Jules Rimet looked on as the World Cup was reborn. In Brazil, 20 years after their victory in the inaugural tournament, Uruguay reclaimed the trophy from Italy, beginning a new chapter in the journey of the Jules Rimet. 4 years later, the World Cup in Switzerland saw one of the biggest upsets in soccer history when the West German team, banned from the previous World Cup post-war, defeated the vaunted Hungarians. Jules Rimet handed his eponymous trophy to the triumphant German team, symbolizing the restoration of international unity. It would be the last time he presented the prized trophy. Jules Rimet passed away in 1956, but his dream lived on. Bolstered by a feisty Brazilian team that won back-to-back tournaments in 1958 and 62, the World Cup was thriving. But after years of relative calm, the Jules Rimet trophy once again came into jeopardy, this time 4 months before the 1966 World Cup in England.
Just before the World Cup, an exhibition with sport with stamps being held in London. And the Jules Rimet is exhibited in this postage stamp exhibition.
Alongside a collection of special issue stamps for the World Cup finals. It was only on display for one day. The very next day, it was stolen.
Everyone in the world is asking, where is the World Cup?
Lots of speculation in the following week. It had been stolen by various gangsters and underworld bodies. The day after the theft,
This Football Association get this ransom note from an unknown person. He says, I want £15,000. And to prove he had the trophy, he mailed the Football Association a parcel which contained the octagonal top of the Jules Rimet trophy. On March 25th, the guy who sent this parcel gets arrested.
He spent 2 years in jail for his part in the theft, but
he actually hadn't stolen the cup. He'd got it from someone who did steal it. The Football Association panicked.
But exactly 1 week later,
this barge worker from South London called Dave Corbett is walking his dog.
David Corbett was taking his dog for a walk, Pickles. He was going out to make a phone call in a public phone box. Pickles, the dog, was scratching around at some parcel that had been thrown into the garden.
And Dave Corbett comes over and he finds this package wrapped in newspapers, and he sees gold and the words Brazil 1962. Pickles had found the World Cup.
Along with the great Hollywood screen legends, Rin Tin Tin and Lassie, Pickles the dog was the most famous dog in the world. He found the Jules Rimet trophy. He became a film star, a TV star.
Would have been a huge national embarrassment if the trophy hadn't been recovered. But the trophy's found. It's found in an eccentric, almost typically British way. It was found by a dog.
British people love dogs.
You mention Pickles in this country and everybody knows what you're talking about. Pickles got them out of a lot of serious, serious trouble.
Publicity it caused was unbelievable.
Ticket sales went through the roof.
the host English side won the 1966 World Cup, with the Jules Rimet trophy safely restored to the right hands. No one anticipated the dark fate that awaited it. At the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, two-time champions Italy, Uruguay, and Brazil fought for the highly sought-after third victory and the right to take possession of the Jules Rimet trophy permanently. Brazil, led by a standout performance from the legendary Pelé, emerged victorious.
Brazil had won the cup, the Jules Rimet trophy, for the third time in 1970. They get to keep it forever. A new trophy is commissioned, which is awarded from 1974. But
Brazil's permanent possession of the Jules Rimet proved short-lived, brought to an abrupt and untimely end in 1983.
The Brazilian Soccer Federation, they kept the Jules Rimet at their headquarters in Rio, and they displayed it in this glass case.
A bulletproof glass cabinet. Unfortunately, it had a plywood back.
There's a lot of debate about what happened to the trophy.
Some people have a theory that it was an inside job.
there were various conspiracy theories. One of the cleaners in the offices who'd let the thieves in.
Could this be that the Jules Rimet trophy was cursed?
The original reports coming out of Brazil were that, oh, it was melted down for gold bars.
That's the popular belief.
I asked the Rio police for their evidence that the cup was melted down, and they said, we don't have evidence.
The fact of the matter was that it wasn't actually made of solid gold.
And I think they just said, well, we think it was melted down as a way to end the search.
Never been any trace of the trophy since it was stolen. We're not sure. Was it stolen for a private collector, or was it stolen to be melted down? It may well be in somebody's house, in somebody's private vault, and may surface at some point in the future when somebody dies off.
At Sotheby's, we're getting ready for our major sales next week in London.
When the cup was stolen in England in 1966, the Football Association asked this jeweler, George Bird, to make a replica, just in case the cup wasn't recovered.
They told him it had to be an exact replica. You were not supposed to be able to tell it was a replica except by a technical examination.
It went to Sotheby's auction house in 1997.
By the time of the auction, the sale of an apparent replica put up by Bird's estate had drawn international attention.
You know, the reserve price was £20,000 to £30,000, but suddenly FIFA itself had said there is no limit, buy it.
£40,000.
And it seems that one of the rival bidders was the Brazilian Soccer Federation.
£50,000.
Obviously, a replica of the World Cup is not very valuable, it's not very interesting.
But nobody was sure. Is this the real one, or is this the replica? We know the real one was on the pitch with Bobby Moore. Looking at the base, you look at the photographs and you compare the actual trophy itself with the replica trophy. They're very different.
So why were these people bidding for the replica?
FIFA got an idea in their head that there'd been a mix-up in the handover in 1966. They thought they sent the George Bird replica to the Brazilians.
In England at the 1966 World Cup final, there's evidence that the genuine trophy was presented to Bobby Moore by Her Majesty the Queen, but the replica was kept in the dressing room. When the players returned to the dressing room after the game, one of the England players clearly recalls he was holding one trophy. A police officer came up to him, took it off him, gave him another one and went off, but such was the euphoria of the time, they thought nothing about it.
FIFA believed that the English had kept the real World Cup. Instead of sending the World Cup to Brazil, had sent Brazil the replica and had kept the real thing. So in 1997, FIFA and the Brazilian Soccer Federation said, right, that's the real World Cup, that's the real Jules Rimet, so we will pay any price for it.
150,000.
200,000 pounds.
The trophy itself has this meaning beyond all other trophies in sports.
Jules Rimet was a work of art that held a special significance.
People want the Jules Rimet trophy. They must have the Jules Rimet trophy at all costs.
And finally, £254,000.
The winning bidder was FIFA. They took the decision to buy this trophy at this massive record price, as it was thought to be the original one.
9 times the world record for a comparable item at auction.
It's a ridiculous amount of money to pay for an item. It's a huge amount of money if the trophy was genuine.
Upon technical examination,
They discovered that what they bought was gilt on bronze.
it was a gilt-on-bronze replica.
They were wrong. It wasn't the real one. It was Bird's replica.
That's the power it's got over people for some strange reason. You know, football's the people's game. It's the most played sport in the world. And because of that, the World Cup just seems to draw people in.
The World Cup, you know, everyone from the US to Brazil to Japan to all over Africa, people really care about the World Cup.
I think we hope that this trophy does exist somewhere.
I hope it's still around. It's probably sitting in somebody's living room somewhere.
Though we may never know the fate of the Jules Rimet, what we do know is the story of the dream that gave birth to it and the incredible journey that followed. A battle between triumph and tumult, prestige and peril. What we know is that individuals around the world would go to any length to lift high this small trophy, lured by its magic, its mystery, and the reflection of glory in its gold.
The beautiful French gold mesmerized them all.
And still to this day.
To this day, it still does. It still does.